Put us live on YouTube then.
Good morning and welcome. As you all settle in, we expect to have a very full room today. So make sure that your video is off and your sound is off. And we'll be doing some intros in a few minutes. There also will be a live stream on YouTube, and this is being recorded.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us be glad and rejoice. My name is Pastor Lamar Bailey. I'm the Director for Evangelical Mission and Assistant to the Bishop with the Metro DC Synod. And just thank you, everyone, for being here today and joining us in this conversation. We're excited to have so many folks with us today. I think we have over 100 folks, and we've actually had to add a YouTube channel, so this is wonderful. And we hope that this time will help you serving your congregations and your communities moving forward in these interesting times that we find ourselves in. Before we move forward, I'd like to just open with a word of prayer. So let us pray. Holy God, we lift up to your care all peoples and nations whose lives are impacted by COVID-19. We humbly ask you to give wisdom to leaders, bring understanding to scientists, protect caregivers, heal the sick, and give comfort to those who have lost loved ones. We give you thanks for your extravagant love and grace. We praise you and thank you for the gift of Jesus Christ, who generously gave himself on the cross and overcame sin and death in the grave. Empower us today to live with resurrection hope and to be your light in the world. Bless our speakers and bless our time together. Pray this in your name. Amen. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Wheeler, who serves as the administrative assistant for the DC Metro Synod. And Catherine's going to give us a little bit of an overview on some of the technical aspects of our Zoom call today.
Good morning, everyone. As we see, we already have 70 participants, and I expect this number to go up as we go along. Those who are involved in the event on the web or on Zoom are able to post their questions in the chat box. So if you have not yet been very familiar with Zoom, in the bottom center of your page, you should see something that says chat. And if you click on that, you're going to want to specifically send that to everyone in the meeting, not to any individuals, but to send that to everyone in the meeting so we can all see the questions and we don't have repeats of the same question. We'll do our best to answer those that are here, but with that many participants, we may not get through to everything that we talk through. This will be a recorded meeting, so make sure that you understand that this will be recorded. We ask that everyone have their video and their sound off at this time, their mute on. Keep the sound on because you definitely want to hear people. Put yourself in the speaker view rather than gallery view, so you hear and see the one person that is the speaker at the time, and we will have some information that goes out through the chat. We will also make this chat available afterward along with the video for anyone who would like to see it and use it in their own context. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Catherine. Before we move forward, I would just also like to thank so many people who helped put this together, Catherine Wheeler being one of them, Kelly Champagne, who is our communications director for the Synod, Katie Simbala, who is our creative director, and of course, our Bishop Layla Ortiz, who has a passion for growing and supporting leaders and who has created this space for us to have this conversation. So thank you to all of them. It's truly a team effort. And also a big thanks to Mike Ward for giving us his time and expertise today. Mike has served as a parish pastor. He's served as a vice president of advancement. He has worked with our synod and synod staff for many years and worked with many congregations in the synod with great success. So we really thank you, Mike, for being here today. And so, Mike, I will just turn it over to you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Lamar. And actually, Lamar, can you give me a thumbs up at least that my audio is coming through okay? Perfect. Very good. I had my internet had a hiccup right as we were coming on, so I just wanted to make sure everything was back and working well. I am delighted to be with you today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a few slides at least to guide our conversation. And anyway, we're going to start this with, I'll probably go about 30 or 35 minutes. And then we'll open it up to the questions that you can submit through the chat box. And then I believe it's Catherine's going to feed those to me so that I see them. And Catherine, if you'll just interrupt me if I happen to miss anything or need to pause, that would be fantastic. I've got you pinned on my screen to see while I do that. So I'm excited for this time. Our workshop is called Stewardship in Uncertain Times. I do think they are uncertain, but I don't think they are times without opportunity, without significant generosity still happening, and without people definitely wanting to make a difference in the world. So we find ourselves in uncertain times, but they are certainly not times that need to, cause us not to be able to move ministry forward, to still proclaim the gospel, to still have a significant impact on the world today. A couple of additional resources, in particular, our blog site. I'm going to talk a lot about communication today. There's nothing more important than the way in which we communicate in these days. I've got a video that reinforces that topic there on the blog site, so feel free to check that out. If you like what you see there, you're welcome to sign up. If you don't like what you see there, simply ignore it and don't tell anybody you didn't like it. That would be great for me. So that is certainly there. I've got a book out through Fortress Press. It's available to you and certainly further enforces the things I'm talking about. It doesn't talk about a pandemic because that wasn't in play when it was published in January, but certainly the concepts are there. My ground rules for today, I just want to make sure it's very clear that my topic is stewardship and generosity. I know there's a lot facing leaders in our churches today, and my space is to talk about the stewardship and generosity conversation. I will let others focus on the conversation regarding, how to do virtual worship, how to do pastoral care in these times, all the other leadership items you face. So don't think I don't care about those. I just want to make it clear that the space that I'm in is to talk about stewardship and generosity in these times. So as we do that, actually, I'll back up. I do want to tell a couple stories because there's generosity out there today. I had a call from one of you earlier today that said somebody in the congregation reached out and wants to make a $5,000 gift to launch a fund at the congregation to care for families that have been dramatically affected by this pandemic. That generosity is there. People in times like we're in today see their neighbor in need in a way that they don't see in typical times. And so they want to step up in generosity. My congregation received one of the $500 World Hunger Grants from the ELCA. The email came out to us saying that we had a couple of weeks to match $750 so that we would get that $500 grant from ELCA World Hunger. In 42 minutes, we reached $900 towards the $750 goal. And by the end of the day, we had raised $4,500 for World Hunger. People were hungry. People were excited to give to something that we knew would make a difference in our world today. We see our neighbor in need and we step up. I know another person who I think is living what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 6:34 in a very significant way for today. Matthew 6:34 is the scripture about not worrying so much about tomorrow, that tomorrow has worries of its own, but live more for today. Person said, you know what? I am uncertain in these days. I'm not sure what the future holds, but what I do know is that here in the month of April, I'm okay. I still have my job. My spouse still has her job. It's certainly uncertain times, but right now we're okay. So what we can do today is we can double our giving to the church. I don't know what May will hold, but for right now, what I know that can happen is we'll double our giving today. I think that's a very honest response. I think that's a response that says, yeah, there's uncertainty, but right now, if things are okay, we can live generously. And so that generosity is in the system. as leaders of the church, it's our job to cultivate that. It's our job to share that story, because generosity becomes contagious. And we'll get into that here in just a minute. So in each of the last 5 recessions, there's been 5 recessions since 1980. And in each of those, Protestants have increased the percentage of income that they give away. Okay, so the overall dollars could decrease, but the percentage of the income gifted increases during these times. And what we in philanthropy believe is that it's when people see their neighbor in need, they're more willing to step up. They're willing to step up to organizations that they know and trust. They're willing to step up to organizations that they know are making an impact and making a difference. And they're willing to step up because they see so much need around them. And so we need to make sure we don't just look inward, that we don't look just at preservation of an organization, but we look at ways in which we can expand the ways in which we're proclaiming the gospel and living out our mission, and invite people to that, because people are willing to step up and give to the things that are making a difference. And we'll talk a lot about that as we go through this today. There's 4 steps in most recessions is from a stewardship perspective. There's the initial positive response. And I believe we're still living in that right now. That story of my congregation raising $900 in 42 minutes. The person reaching out to a pastor in your synod and saying, I want to give $5,000 to start a fund. The initial positive response happens, whether it's a couple weeks or a couple of months. And we need to, first off, we need to recognize that that's what we're in and encourage it. And second is, the more we encourage it, the more we share the stories of generosity, the more we share the stories of impact that we're making, the longer this initial positive response will take place. And the other good news for the church is giving to the church is the last thing that a donor tends to cut, at least a church donor tends to cut. And so as congregational leaders, we enjoy people maintaining their giving as long as they possibly can if they are adversely affected by the recession. After this initial positive response, there normally is a period of decline. But again, the better we do in this initial positive response, the smaller that decline may be. And we even have potential to totally not have that decline in the church, depending on how long the recession may last. Then there'll be a surge. New opportunities, as I listen to the church in these days, there are new opportunities presenting themselves. Virtual worship for one, other ways of doing ministry, other ways to reach out, and a sense that the church is more important in people's lives than many people had been giving it credit for. And people re-looking for the church again after a hiatus of being away. Major donors will lead a surge for organizations that are looking to advance their mission as we start to come out of this recession. And so we need to be aware of that and begin to identify those major donors, begin to cultivate them to what may be coming. And then we'll live into the new normal. And hopefully we set ourselves up that that's a reset of giving higher as we enter into that new normal. So I'm probably going to focus mainly around the initial positive response now, because that's what we're still in, and that has such a great ability to keep us out of the decline or to mitigate the decline that may be coming. And the way we do that is with communication. What we have to be about is not what we've been about in most churches for the last several decades, if not centuries. We need to stop telling people what we do and tell people the impact and the outcome that is happening because of what we do. One of my favorite stories I heard early on, was a congregation in South Carolina. The first week they did virtual worship. And the pastors admitted they had no pre-training in how to do this, and it wasn't easy for them. But worship was released at 10 a.m. on Sunday morning as they planned. The very first comment in the comment section was from somebody who said something like this: "I'm not a member of your church or any church, but I woke up this morning with the feeling of a need for God. And I found your worship service, and I found what I was looking for. Thank you for proclaiming the gospel. You better believe I'll be back." That's an impact and an outcome from what we're doing with virtual worship. In my own life, about the second week into being at home after canceling all my airline flights that I had planned. I was working at my computer, and an email popped in from my congregation, and it was a video link our musician and his 7th grade daughter had recorded holding evening prayer. I clicked on it, I played it in the background, and I continued to work. And then all of a sudden, about 5 minutes in or halfway in, I just paused and I recognized how exhausted I was, how tired I was, and how I needed a sense of refocusing and recentering and putting God first in all the work that I was doing. I think I listened to that 3 times in a row. That was my church being relevant in my life to provide me a little bit of Sabbath rest in the midst of the chaos of what this pandemic is. And so what we need to do is not say that we sent out that service. We don't need to say how many people viewed it, although that's fine information. But what we need to tell is what impact did sending that out have on people's lives. And it had one on mine, and I know it had one on other people. So we have to, there's 2 pieces of types of communication to share. The generosity stories, and those are kind of those stories I told you at the beginning. My congregation raising $750 or $900 in 42 minutes, of people offering gifts, of people deciding to double their giving. Those are generosity stories. Those stories will encourage other people to generosity. And the reason they'll give to your organization is because of the impact and outcome that you're demonstrating that you're having. In good times, we can kind of just live that impact and outcome, and it's okay. I think we can always do better at telling it and expressing it and discerning it. But we didn't, I heard a number of pastors talk about how Easter Sunday was such a letdown compared to what it normally is. And it's because we didn't live in the moment. We pre-recorded the service and we simply observed it then on Sunday morning. But we didn't get that initial feedback. We didn't see the joy on people's faces. We didn't see, the community coming together and living in community. So we've missed some of that impact and outcome. And we need to be willing to tell it, because there still is impact and outcome. I hear over and over again how valuable it is to be able to maintain the rhythm of worship. I hear over and over again how wonderful it is to be able to explore other services in addition to our own. And heard yesterday somebody's having a virtual coffee hour, and they break into Zoom rooms after the service, and having that community that is having an impact on people's lives. But now we have to get people to tell the story, and then we need to share it to remind people that yes, it's different, but it's still significant in our lives where we happen to be today. I can't stress enough just how critical it is for these impact and outcome and generosity stories to be told. Next thing to talk about, though, is so we're in the midst of, we're going to call it a crisis. I hope we have a crisis communication plan. And if you don't have one, it's very simple. In the church, the crisis communication plan is that the only people that get to talk on behalf of the church are your pastor, your deacon, or the council president. Okay? My dad's a CPA. I love financially minded people, but sometimes the story that they tell isn't the story that we need to tell in order to lead people to generosity. We don't need people to accidentally lead people to scarcity, when what we need to be doing is telling the generosity stories and the impact stories. And I don't say this to say it's not important to maintain a watch over how finances are going. But I say it to mean that we don't want to accidentally lead people to a message that isn't the true message, isn't the one we want to hear. A congregation very early on in this, the first thing they did is they went through their budget and they cut out all the expenses that they could. And they told the congregation, what they meant to say was, we're being good stewards of your gift. But what the congregation heard was, you don't need our money anymore because you're not doing any ministry any longer. And giving immediately dropped off. So let's not accidentally tell people a message we don't want them to hear. So have a crisis plan. In all of your communication, let's quit as a church telling people what they ought to do. Let's invite people to join us. I had a pastor, it was 2 weeks ago now, called me and we were talking, and he said, I'm going to tell my congregation that they should tithe their stimulus checks. What do you think about that? And I said, it's a terrible idea. And that wasn't the response he expected from me. He thought I would have welcomed additional giving. And I said, no, it's a terrible idea because you're telling people what to do. I said, if you want people to tithe their stimulus checks, tell them that you're going to do that. Tell them, demonstrate generosity and invite them to join you. I call that the join me culture. And even better than that is a join us culture. I said, what if you go to your council and you say, you're going to tithe your stimulus check because you don't need it all. But you're confident that there's people around that council table that don't need it at all, and they can give the entire thing away. But maybe there's somebody around the table that needs their stimulus check. Maybe they can take their family out for takeout one night so that they can be generous in that a local restaurant worker is going to keep their job and get a salary for the day while they still feed their family and they still need that check. And I said, maybe you even set a goal that half the money in generosity from the council helps preserve ministry at the local congregation level. And maybe half of it is deployed to your ministry partners. You know, because the goal in all this isn't that our congregation survives. The goal in all of this is that the gospel continues to be proclaimed, that people continue to be able to do ministry. And I know some of our ministries, boy, I came out of outdoor ministry. That's where much of my faith formation happened. It's where I learned to be a fundraiser. I'm worried about camps that can't open this summer. We need to be taking care of other ministries. Food pantries need help. Social service agencies need help. You know, so let's not just preserve the ministry of the local congregation, but let's continue to believe in abundance that can not just help us survive, but can help ministry thrive in all of its contexts right now. So let's create that join me, you join us culture. And then once the council has done that, then invite the congregation to join the council. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. A few people don't mind being the first generous person. Like this person that approached a pastor in your synod and said, here's $5,000 to launch a fund to care for people. That person was willing to step out in faith in that, but her goal was that other people would join her in that gift. So let's have the council express their generosity and then invite other people to that type of generosity and that belief that there's abundance and that everybody can do their part. I believe everybody can make a gift significant to their means, regardless of the situation they're in. And I think I gave demonstration to a number of ways in which that can happen. There's certainly more to that. And I'm not trying to say people aren't affected. But sometimes people in the midst of a crisis, when they lose a job, they'll still give money away. They'll give a larger percentage of their income away, even though it's less dollars. I think that's very faithful. And I think that's an act of generosity that should be celebrated. So how do you do this? When do you do this? Certainly email and website are critical in these days, but let's also remember that we are an older church and not everybody's going to be comfortable with our digital means of giving. I think you should still continue to send a monthly print piece, direct mail letter, tell outcome stories in it. By the way, Lamar and Catherine, I have a sample I'm happy to share with you of this. Kind of a one page, here are some of the impacts that we're having. And in that letter, you include a reply envelope so that people can make a gift. If for those people who love to write a check, let them write a check. We don't need to force people into stuff that they don't want to do in this time. We can invite them to try something new, but we don't need, you know, I'd rather get a gift by a check than not get a gift at all. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Again, there's a video at my blog site about communication. Immediate activity I would do if I was a parish pastor. If you haven't already, check in with your top 10 donors. This is a slightly different statistic, but 73% of giving in Protestant churches happens from 10% of our donors. The reason I would check in with the top 10 is because when you check in with the top 10, depending on congregation size, you're checking in with somewhere between 20 and 60% of the giving to your congregation. Check in on them. It isn't, the call doesn't just say, hey, can you keep giving? The call is, it's a pastoral care call first, and followed up by, you know, after listening, a proper response to see if people are going to be able to continue their giving. And never assume somebody has to give less because their situation today has changed adversely. I had a pastor that had a conversation with a hospitality executive who thought very much that their giving was going to have to decrease. The member said, no, I don't have to decrease my giving. I have a donor advised fund and it's fully funded with my offering this year. The church will still get my offering. Don't worry about my giving. And so we never want to say no on behalf of our donor, but we also want to listen to our donor and invite people who need to cut their giving to do so and to not feel shame about that. That's very important. Nobody wants to have to cut their giving to an organization, especially their church. And when that happens, they will inevitably feel some shame and guilt. And we need to be poised and ready to relieve that guilt. I would then check in on my council. And by the time I've done these two activities, I'll know how giving's going in the congregation. If everybody's still doing fine and going to be able to continue, we don't need to worry about financial issues. We can start worrying about other things. And then the next thing I would do, it's coming up late next week. Once we get to April 30th, we're going to have, most of us will not have worshiped in person between March 15 and April 30. I want to know who hasn't given in that period of time. So have your financial secretary run a report, highest donor to lowest donor, of anybody who doesn't have a gift of record in that period of time, and then figure out what to do from there. If you have, sometimes it's not going to be an issue. Sometimes our largest donors give quarterly or give once a year. And if they typically give in October or November and they haven't given anything yet, they haven't broken their pattern. What I want to see is who broke their pattern. I have a hunch, and you all can tell me if I'm right or not. I have a hunch that a lot of the people that have broken their pattern are our smaller givers. They tend to give us $20 a week when they're in worship. And since they haven't been in worship, they've broken their pattern and they're still not giving. If I see that, the tactic I would probably deploy is to make sure that I have text to give, and I make sure that I have that in the midst of the worship service so that people can make their gift at the time that they're used to making the gift, and text to give is a tool to do that. But until I do the analysis, I don't know what's going on. I had another synod call me this week and say that their giving between January 1 and April 20th had declined by $50,000. And I said, well, who has decreased their giving? And they didn't know. And so we didn't really know anything. Like last year, there could have been a congregation that made a $100,000 gift in the month of March, and they didn't give it yet this year. And so it could be that they're just late and everybody else has been increasing their giving. So we don't know if they're down or not just by looking at the total number. Don't do that in your congregation. Make sure you do the analysis to see if you are down, where are you down, and then create what's the tactic that will help solve this problem. It might be a couple of phone calls. It might be a text to give opportunity. It might be some other things like that. Automatic giving, I was wrong on this. I really thought during this crisis that we would see a decrease in new signups for automatic giving. I have been proven wrong on that. I have a congregation in Detroit metro area, added 10 people in the month of March to their automatic giving roster. We have apparently done a good job of branding this in our churches, that people are willing to step up now that they need it because we've given them the trust that it's safe to use. I thought people would have wanted more control. I guess maybe that's because I like a little more control, and would have wanted to set it up through their own financial institution. And we do see that happening, which basically every financial institution in America has a text to give or has a automatic giving feature through their bill pay system. So I thought that would go up. But let's create a join me culture in this as well. If you get somebody new to sign up, capture their story and then tell that story. And that's a great story to tell during the offering time of your worship service, which, by the way, I still think we should be having offering time. And that's a great place to be telling those generosity stories, to be telling those stories of outcome. And if you get somebody to sign up for automatic giving, telling their story as to why now is the time that they wanted to do it. And I bet it sounds something like, I miss being face-to-face in worship. I love the opportunity to place my offering in the offering plate, but I can't do that now. And I just couldn't imagine the church not having my offering. And so I wanted to sign up for it automatically. I still think it's a fine time for challenge gifts. If you can get somebody to offer $50 for each new person to sign up for automatic giving, I bet you'll see some people respond to that. It will finally push them to finally do that automatic setup to make the automatic gift. I would, though, anytime I push automatic giving, also tell people you can do it through your own financial institution. You can set that up in the bill pay function, and that will work very well.
Mike, before you go on, we did have a question. Somebody asked what text to give is. So if you could just explain that quickly.
So text to give, and I don't know the systems like Tidely and Vanco well enough to know if they have the feature available. I'm going to have to do a little research on this myself to find who can provide that. I think softwares like Realm and Breeze do have it built in as a feature, but I could likely be corrected on that. I invite people to use the chat box to say who has the feature, if you don't mind. text to give is simply having it set up that people can text a dollar amount to a number that you provide. So if I were to text $20 to the number provided, I would be making a gift of $20. It would just automatically happen through my phone, that I can simply text the number, and that gift is made based on my relationship with the organization then. So it's a great way to get discretionary gifts, which is what I think a lot of those gifts are. So my hunch is some of your colleagues across the Synod are going to be more astute to that than I am. I know it's a good tool. Your colleagues will know exactly how to have it set up. So let's make sure that our communication is about abundance and not scarcity. Your ship, for the most part, unless your ship was sinking prior to this happening, I don't expect your ship is sinking now. So don't tell people it is. I know in the church we've gotten some response when we tell people how dire our situation is. I will tell you that during times of recession, people don't want to just help organizations survive. They want to help organizations reach people who are in need, and they want to help organizations actually live out their mission. Now, if your ship really is sinking, your donors will help you bail water one time. But after that, enough is enough, and people will let the ship sink. So let's keep focused on what we could do instead of the fact that the ship is sinking. I would love to see congregations in this time develop a policy that says, you know what, these days are not meant for us to build our reserves. These days are to deploy money to have ministry happen. And so we're going to establish how much money we need to operate in the month of April. And if we have $100 beyond that, we're going to give it away to one of our ministry partners, or we're going to invest that in new equipment so we can do virtual worship better. Or, but to create a monthly plan for what to do with excess. People who work with me know that they need to have in mind what they would do if revenue accidentally exceeded expenses at the end of the year. I think the end of the year is too far away for people. There's urgency in our system now. And I think we need to be deploying money more quickly than that, and at least point people to the fact that we have a plan for what we would do if we get more money than we need to spend here for the local congregational ministry this month. That's a great way to present abundance. Tell these stories of generosity. Please, please, please have an offering and tell outcome and generosity stories in the worship service itself. If you don't have an offering in your worship service virtually, I think you're telling people that it's really just a fundraising tactic we use when people are together, rather than a part of the worship service and a means of interacting in the liturgy and doing something of value, giving something of value away as an act of worship. So I highly encourage having an offering in the worship service itself. There's something out there called donor advised funds. And at the end of 2019, that wasn't too long ago, there was $120 billion in donor advised funds. And a donor advised fund is something a donor sets up, whereas they give money to the fund, and at that moment, they get credit for a charitable contribution, okay? They cannot take that money back and use it for themselves. That money has to be deployed to a nonprofit 501c3, which all of you are. But it sits in that fund until the donor tells the fund where to send it. At the end of 2019, $120 billion sat in these funds. That is money available to be deployed to make ministry happen. So you need to discern and figure out if you have any people in your congregation that have donor advised funds. The way you would know is that if they send you a check for their offering, it doesn't come from a personal check. It comes from a check from like Fidelity Charitable, Schwab Charitable, the ELCA Foundation, some organization like that that has donor advised funds. Don't go ask them immediately. Just keep these people in mind that when you have a need, when you have a vision for what you're going to do next, for when you have a vision for how you're going to cover any shortfall that you may be experiencing during these days, they'll be your help. They're going to be the ones to help you into that next piece. So be looking for that now, though. It's always great to have a roster of who these people are so that you're not left searching for it later. And again, I've talked a little bit about, but we need in these days to be about more than just the survival of the congregation. You know, the synod is walking closer with congregations now, or at least it's more visible for many than normal. Let's make sure that our synod is strengthened during these times. Our outdoor ministries are at a critical point where many of them are facing not having camp this summer. I used to be an outdoor ministry. I don't know what the business model looks like to survive that. Let's make sure we're caring for the partners that we care about, that are doing ministry, that partner with us in the best of times, so that they're still with us on the other side of this. The goal is not, I think it would be a very sad world if the only nonprofit that made it through this crisis was my local congregation. That is not the vision of the fullness of the kingdom of God that I see when I look for a vision of the fullness of the kingdom of God. So I might have gotten a little preachy. I don't care. The CARES Act, you've all heard of this. This is a $2.2 trillion that just had a lot more money added, or I guess today the House will vote to add more money to it. The Senate already voted to add more money to and the section that most of us are interested in is PPP. I am not here to tell you if you should apply, if you shouldn't apply, or how to apply. That's not the lane in which I drive in. I do think you should all look into it and explore and decide if it's something you should do or not. And I think you should do that quickly, because the money went quickly the first time. I expect it will go quickly again. What I'm here to say is, if you get a PPP loan grant, then don't let that be the first story of generosity that your members hear. Your members need to hear stories of generosity of fellow members, of other people in their community. The first story of generosity should not be the federal government sent us a check. Isn't that great? Because if that's the first story of generosity your people hear, what they're going to hear is, hey, that's great, the government gave us money, I don't have to give anymore, okay? Don't let that happen. Let the government help be one story among many, don't let that be your story. And then when you get it, say, hey, great, we got some money for PPP. That will help those of you that have lost your job and have had to cut back. You know, we'll be able to cover your giving and our ministry can thrive. And we're going to start looking at who else we can bless with gifts and help. Stimulus checks, I think I kind of explained what I would do with that already in my example as to how I would approach a council. I would not just tell my members to tithe their stimulus checks. It might be a fun time to talk about, hey, it's hard to tithe during our regular course of life because only about 11% of American Protestants tithe 10% or more. And so maybe it would be fun that when you get a windfall, you give 10%. Here's a chance for you to practice. I think that would be a fine story. But it's a far, far better story when we invite people to join us and not just tell people what to do. And then quarterly reminders could have already gone out, but sometimes in the pace of church, they haven't gone out yet. And so let's do a better job in the midst of these days of being more personal, not simply sending a transactional receipt, but sending a letter at least that tells some of the impact that we've had, some of the outcome stories that we've had. Let's express a more personal feeling for gratitude in these days. If you know somebody that's lost a job or somebody whose livelihood has been very much affected, and they've still given to you, a handwritten note on their quarterly reminder is a beautiful thing to them that says something like, you know, I know it's a tough time for you. Thanks so much for your generosity. And that's probably enough of a message. And then people who step up and give extra, I would actually call them. I would make sure that all of your counters and financial people are on high alert, that if somebody breaks their giving pattern to the positive, that you are alerted as a leader in the congregation so you can make a phone call and say, thank you for increasing your generosity in these days. And if somebody drops their giving, also be alerted so that you can care for that person in whatever's going on in their life. That may be the first indication that their job has been affected. Or it could just be that you're dealing with somebody who's really fearful and needs somebody to give them the peace of what God can provide in times like this. I mean, I don't want to diminish that thought at all either, because there was a lot of fear financially even as the economy boomed, and now as we're in these days, I know there's even more fear. And just tell those stories of impact. Have I mentioned that that's important yet? I think I have. So. We've got a couple of programs. I've worked with some of you. Stewardship for All Seasons is a multi-year journey normally. to totally change a culture in a congregation around the area of generosity. We're going to launch a new program called Beginning a Culture of Generosity to guide people through their fall drive and end of year giving this year. And then my book's there too. So happy to explore those ways, but probably not here in this space. So I think, Catherine, I'm ready to move to questions. If you are, I'll stop sharing the screen here, and we can do that.
Excellent. I don't have anything yet, so this is the perfect time for people to go to that chat box and to go ahead and start posting anything specific. I am also, we have Kelly Champagne on our YouTube channel to make sure that we are able to monitor any questions there. So if there's someone on the YouTube channel who has a question, feel free to put that in your chat box as well. I know that we did have some people who responded on this about the different pay to text options. So yes, Tidely has it, PayPal has it. And some of the others, PushPay, I'm sorry, and Vanco all have it. Some people are still waiting numbers from Vanco. That's been one of the things, is that there is some delay as you're signing up for these things, because these agencies were quite ready for the onslaught of groups that would be joining. I know Tidely has had some slowness in this. I just had a question. Is there a recommendation of how much cash reserve a congregation should have?
So in good times, I usually recommend 2 months worth of expenses. All right. Now, if you don't currently have reserves, the goal isn't to get to 2 months worth of expenses right now. I think I think this is also a time when our mission really needs to inform what we do. I don't think the mission of most congregations is to build reserves right now. If I had no money on hand, I'd probably try to build a little bit of a cushion so I'm not having to, miss payroll or anything. Because if you have more than 2 months of reserves set up, I personally believe it's time to look to ministry partners. Sometimes people call those a rainy day fund, and I've heard this from a number of people now. It's raining. The reason we have reserves is for times like this, to make sure that we survive, I suppose, but not only that, but we thrive. There are new opportunities being provided to us on a daily basis, just about. We need to, I hope all of us have a strategic plan and we work from that and we know what our mission is. Live into your mission right now. Because that's the reason we're here, is to live out our mission, not just survive. I don't think we ever need to have more than 2 months of reserves on hand. So if you have more than that, start deploying that money. And if you want to, build up a little bit now, but that can be a multi-year process. My goal would be 2 years from now, I have 2 months worth of reserves if I didn't have anything now. Because failing to do mission just to build reserves isn't doing what we're called to do, in my opinion. So
Connie Thompson said, I realize this is a stewardship conversation. I've heard you speak of reaching out pastorally to people whose income has been cut. Do you have a stewardship response to people who are living in fear, in addition to Matthew 6, and as to how it relates to generosity? She said, I ask because I believe contentment is related to generosity, but can you help me with a script for that?
Yeah, so first off, there's the biblical theological rationale. And then there's the culture and invitation piece. And so the reason a lot of people live in fear is because they don't hear the stories of generosity of those around them. They don't recognize when somebody, the witness of somebody telling you that, who looks like you, is in a similar situation as you, and they find a way to be generous, can have even as much impact or more. It's that personal witness piece is also critical. I often go to Luther in the first article of the Creed that everything does belong to God first. First article of the Creed, I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. Luther says, Cliff Notes version, everything we have is a gift of God. And from there, that's kind of the theological basis to say we don't need to hoard it all and keep it all. Hoarding and keeping is a sign of lack of trust and faith. But I think even better than the scriptural witness is then other people sharing what they can do. Like I had heard about tithing growing up. I didn't realize you could grow beyond that until Virginia taught me that she and her husband grew 1% a year. And when Bob died, they were giving 38% of their income away. I would have been happy to stop at 10%, not hearing her, witness and that. So we need to tell these generosity stories because they will impact people in deep, profound ways and help relieve the fear as well to know, wow, if they can do it, I guess I can do it.
Going along with that, we had a question as to if you have any suggestions as ways to gather the stories of impact. Are there good questions to ask people to draw out these stories?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would start at the next council meeting. I would first say, and outcome stories are easy at the council meeting, certainly. Just to say, how have you seen God at work in the congregation in the last month as we've been distanced? And you should easily get those stories to start coming then. How do you get the generosity stories? You really do have to pay attention to what people are giving. Because people, some people won't call and tell you what they want to do and how to implement it. Some people will just do it. And I had a pastor from Florida say that in the last 2 weeks, they had 3 people who had never made $1,000 gifts before make $1,000 gifts. I don't know what they grew from, but they were definitely signs of we were here and now we're here. That's a great phone call. And just to say, hey, I noticed you increased your giving. Can you just tell me why you decided to do that? And donors love to tell you. They will be happy to share. And then you get your story to tell. So that's the best way, is to look at your data and then to know. And if the data is a secret from you, now is the time to change that policy. Donor data should be confidential. Pastors should have access to confidential information because they are fully capable of handling confidential information. And you can't get these stories if all of that is a secret from you. There is a very big difference in secrecy and confidentiality. So.
We've had a couple people that have specifically said that so the RMDs for 2020 for retirement accounts can be skipped, but they still encourage your donors not to skip their distribution but take it as a charitable distribution. Yep. And the donors can take the standard deduction up to $300 in charitable contributions without having to itemize. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, so the tax laws did change a couple things. First off, every donor, tax law changed a few years ago where you needed to have a certain amount of charitable contributions before you could itemize and take any extra deduction. This year, every donor can take $300 as a deduction if they make a $300 gift. That's required. So that's something new in the tax law. You don't have to reach a certain amount of giving this year. If you reach $300, you can deduct the $300 on your taxes. So there's a tax advantage. The tax legislation, or the CARES Act, also did suspend required distributions from IRAs if you're 72 years old or older this year. So a lot of donors had started giving their qualified distribution to charity because then they didn't have to take it as income, and then they weren't taxed on income for that. So let's hear this carefully. They don't have to take the distribution this year, but they still can, okay? One of the misconceptions in giving in church a lot of times is that people give for the tax deductibility. That is not true. People give first and foremost to the church because they love the church. They want the mission to continue. And that's what we need to continue to invite people into, okay? Just because they don't have to give a required distribution doesn't mean they can't, and doesn't mean they won't. We need to invite them into giving to make an impact and to make a difference. And I believe most of those gifts will continue because tax deductibility is always appreciated by churchy donors, but it's not the reason that they give. In surveys as to why you gave, it usually rates about 5 or 6, maybe even 7 in the list of reasons why people choose to give to the church. So it is not the motivator. It is helpful. Don't get me wrong. It's a great thing for donors when they get it, but it is not the reason they make the gift. So don't assume that that's the reason they give.
Someone said that to address concerns of more financially conservative, what if we set aside 25 cents of every dollar in anticipation of reduced giving in coming months and contribute 75 cents to our ministry partners? What do you think about creating some sort of plan that sets some aside for kind of possibly a rainy day fund, and then the other goes to the ministry partners?
I think a formula like that is very faithful and sounds good. And then probably what I would say is that at the end of the year, if you have money left in that fund because you didn't need it, then you'll figure out how to deploy that as well. I think that's a very faithful response. It trusts the future, but it's also being prudent with what's going on in the world today. I think that's a great idea. In fact, I might steal it.
And I think that you would probably say communication, communication, communication with that. You want people to know that you're doing that, you're supporting those ministry partners.
Absolutely. And then get those ministry partners to tell us what difference did it make that we sent you that gift. If you're a ministry partner, they owe you the outcome on the other side. I mean, and so ask for that. Say, what impact did our $5,000 make to your camp this year when you couldn't open? You know, they'll give you a great story. And so, and demand it. I mean, and if you have to, teach them how to tell it, right? I mean, say, no, you're still telling me what you did. What difference did it make? You know, dig into the why it mattered.
I am not seeing any other questions right now. I know that we've got some people who are saying that there's a lot of charitable opportunities in the CARES and SECURE Acts. If one is charitably minded, they can multiply the gift with tax-advantaged giving.
Mm-hmm.
So just thinking about how you're going to take those dollars that do come in and multiply them.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into specific accounting advice for people.
Of course.
There are charitable opportunities out there, but yeah, I am not here to give you tax advice.
So I've put in the chat, several people have been asking about what is going to be available after this this streaming today. And we will be putting both the video, a copy of the chat, the slides that Mike provides, and he just said that he also is going to provide us a little bit of information on a sample letter. You asked me to remind you of that. So we will be putting those into a folder, a finance folder, on our COVID resources page. So if you go to our website and you click on COVID resources, you'll see that we have a shared Google folder there. And in that, you can see different folders within that, and we'll have a finance one there that is specifically for today's Zoom meeting. So we'll have all of that bundled up for you. You'll be able to share that with different people in your councils, if you're in different synods, wherever else. We would love to have this be expanded beyond today. The more we can help each other, the farther we go, and the more we spread the love of Jesus. Last call for questions before we wrap up today.
I don't see any more questions. Can folks hear me okay?
You are still having some issues.
Well, I apologize for my audio issues, and thank you, Mike, for coming. And if the Synod can be of any support to you, please feel free to contact us. Our contact information is on the website. Thank you for everyone being here. Catherine, if you could fill in maybe if folks did not hear that, I appreciate it.
Sure. We just want to thank everyone. We especially want to thank Mike for his time today. This has been an incredible time of discussion and wonderful ideas, and especially how we're going to continue to communicate with everyone in the most positive way through the difficulties. So thank you to Mike, and thank you to all who have shown up. We will continue to share this. Mike, did you want to say one last thing before we close up?
I just really appreciate it, and do want to share if there's something I can help you with. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm finding plenty of ways to keep busy during these times, but I'm also not getting on airplanes and all that kind of thing. So feel free to reach out to me, and we can talk about your own situation if that can be helpful too.
Alice has asked how many cats you have, Mike.
So my office is a foster cat room, and there's currently one residing with me. Was she active during our time? Often she'll play, but no, there's a foster cat that lives in my office with me.
Well, thank you again. Thank you to everyone who came. God bless you and your ministries and all that we continue to do together. Take care. Goodbye.